Good evening, I am Tomas Guevara, and this is the channel Rewriting the Reality. If you want to create your reality in an efficient way, please subscribe to this channel and give us a like. I have more than 40 years of gathering information to prove what the universal consciousness is, or God if you want to call it this way. I call it universal consciousness to differentiate it from the word consciousness that has different and even controversial meanings. To begin with, universal consciousness is everything. It has no beginning or end, hence I call it universal, because it applies to all realities and all dimensions. That is, it is the sum of everything. Obviously, universal consciousness is composed of elements, and we are one of those elements. I would say the main one. By conscience we must understand the knowledge, or ability to know what we are doing objectively or subjectively. We are essences, that is, gods, however, for this reality, in which we are living. We designed a master plan, if you want to define it in this way. This plan is to forget our divinity for the purity of our experiences. As essences, we decided to inhabit this dimension and many more. In each dimension we have focuses, that is, lives. We inhabit a body, and all these bodies have consciousness. To be born in this dimension it is necessary to have at least 3 lives, or focuses to represent the element of orientation. Orientation, which is the way of seeing and constructing our reality, does not have a direct relation with gender or our sexuality, which most confuses with masculine, feminine and the other, homosexuality. The orientation can be defined as common, intermediate, and soft. In a separate episode we will explain everything about orientation. So as part of this plan we established certain rules, to say it in other words. These rules are to choose gender, male or female. Another element of our reality is emotions, and believe it or not, another essential element is religion. Here let me tell you that even those who call themselves atheists are part of this religious element. Even science that wants to know everything is seen as an anti-religious movement, and therefore forms part of this religious element. And finally, the element of sexuality, which does not mean sexual relations per se. These are the bases of our reality and how we create it, because each of us creates our own reality, and it will always differ in some way from the reality of the other people with whom we establish communication. Our problem is that we do not accept these differences. However, in this time we are beginning to accept our differences, because at a subjective, not unconscious, level we know that there is no separation within the universal consciousness. We like and attract drama, and that is why we have invented all kinds of wars in the last 2 millennia, not counting epidemics. I was recently reading an article from the Oxford Academy on the nature of consciousness. According to them, consciousness is an unusual phenomenon to study scientifically. But it is unusual precisely because they do not know how to study it. Science studies tangible things, and consciousness is not a thing. It is an action, just as love is. Science does not study love. We have not yet understood what love is. Science considers consciousness to be a first-person and subjective phenomenon, and in part it is, but this definition falls short. They argue that science is an objective third-person endeavor, and this is true. However, this eagerness is misguided or misdirected. According to the Oxford Academy, science could step aside trying to explain what consciousness is, and concentrate on characterizing the different neural activities that are reliably correlated with consciousness through a process called NCCs, and then, they tell us that, although this process was not originally designed as a foundation to explain consciousness, they have learned a lot. But that has been a futile attempt to explain consciousness. Even to find a real process to explain what consciousness is. That is, they still do not know what consciousness is. What they don't understand is that everything is related to consciousness, even our thoughts, and for this we use links of consciousness. This is what makes it possible to entangle particles at unprecedented distances. I repeat, consciousness does not rise, neither is born or happens, it simply is. The universal consciousness is constantly moving in an expansion, doubling in itself. It is an expansion that has no end, and we see the reflection in how the universe expands. It is a mirror-like reflection, to put it in a way that is understood. All our inventions reflect the action of consciousness. The internet is a good example. Remember, universal consciousness is an action and, as such, permeates all our actions, because we are elements of consciousness. We are always communicating with consciousness, and today, thanks to the internet, we are globally communicated. But we do not depend on it, since we could do it telepathically, something that we have forgotten and that we almost do not use except for a few exceptions that we consider paranormal phenomena. But in about 200 years, the internet is going to disappear. As essences, we are all equal. None is more than another, precisely because we are all one. Physically, in this reality, or in other realities, we are not equal, and the purpose of this inequality is for experimentation. That is why, as part of our experiences, when we are born in this world, we do it at once at different times and, as different races and in two genders that are the essential elements that we create. This birth resembles fireworks games, and hence the term the Big Bang. Before we are born, we choose our parents, siblings, and other relatives. We choose whether we want to align with the DNA of our parents or not. That's why in families that have always been healthy, suddenly someone is born who is sickly or with some deformity. This is a personal decision. It is not something imposed by some entity or God, who chooses our destiny, or someone who sends us on a mission. This proves that karma does not exist, because we always choose options that express our intention. That represents the value of fulfillment, and that means how content, comfortable, or happy we are with our life. In other words, if we consider ourselves fulfilled. When we are not happy or comfortable, then it is time to withdraw from this world and continue our journey in other worlds or dimensions. It is very common that when a loved one or not very loved one dies, we say God took him or her, and this completely negates another biblical value, free will. The decision to die is up to you, and you make that decision in seconds. That's why when some people who have had an illness suddenly recover, and we all consider it a miracle, and miracles don't exist. You simply decided to continue living as you could have decided to die. Near-death experiences are dramas, staged by our subjective selves to get our attention when we are not following our intent. It's just a reminder, because our intent is not set in stone, we can always modify it. That is why all those people who have participated in these dramas undergo a 180-degree transformation. And it is because we always need a trigger to make certain decisions that we can consider transcendental. Other dramas are the epidemics that we have created, such as the COVID, which we are still experiencing its consequences which incidentally has been quite beneficial for the majority, even for those who died, since they had an excuse to leave this world. Science has endeavored to discover how consciousness emerged, without recognizing that it has always existed and will not cease to exist. There are those who believe that consciousness emerged from our brain, without recognizing that our brain is only an organ to analyze our reality. Just like the heart that has a main function, which is to pump blood into all corners of the human body. Today, I was reading something very interesting in a scientific report. It claims that reading 6 minutes a day minimizes stress. Which is true, and the same can be said of chess or Sudoku. Where does stress come from? It comes from analyzing and reanalyzing one and many times, a situation for which we do not have a satisfactory or pleasant answer. Then the brain enters a crossroads at which it does not see viable options. It does not see them because it is using beliefs to analyze the situation or previous experiences or possible experiences. Beliefs influence how we create our reality. We are influenced by the beliefs of our parents, family, teachers, and professors, and of course our culture. These influences are so easy to accept when we are young, because we have no experiences to compare them with the reality we are living. Let me tell you a joke. A mother was with her 4-year-old son when a horse began to urinate. Immediately the son told her, "Mommy, do not see that horse, because it is sick." The mother asked him, "Who told you that nonsense?" and the child answered, "Daddy." The mother looked at her son and said, "I wish your dad had the health of that animal." That is how the beliefs start. The first thing is to recognize that the human body does not have a mind of its own, it has consciousness, that is, it knows that it is a human body, and all its parts are also conscious, that is, the heart knows that it is the heart and recognizes its function, as do the arms, legs, brain, and all the organs of the human body. However, it does nothing without the instructions of the mind, that is, it is entirely dependent on you as mind in essence. Obviously, you don't always realize the instructions you send to your body, because most of those instructions are sent subjectively, and we're not paying attention. So, the first step is to pay attention to all these instructions and communications, including objective instructions. This is very important because, believe it or not, you are the one who sends the instructions to the body to make the body sick. We do it seemingly without realizing it all the time, although sometimes we do. Sometimes we say, "I'm going to get sick," and we do. But it is very common to say that someone gives us a cold, COVID, or any other disease, and this is not true. Your mind is you, and you also consist of many parts, like the brain we use to analyze, but you are not your brain, nor is the brain the mind. The mind expresses itself objectively and subjectively. The subjective part is not what science and psychologists call unconscious. And it is not because this part is not hidden from you. You just aren't paying attention to it, which is very different. So, we must begin to minimize this separation that we have been creating for millennia, regarding the consciousness of our body. To achieve this, it is important to start recognizing the energy that we are always sending to our body, regardless of whether this energy is objective or subjective. Since the projection of both energies is practically the same. In this way you will become familiar with this subjective energy, and will be aware of how to direct this energy. An example is how some people manage to lower their heartbeat, the temperature. In this way, you will realize that you are the one who directs your body, and that the body does not have a mind of its own. Since achieving this is very simple, start by paying attention to your emotions, and identifying emotions as the subjective part for the moment. The subjective part communicates with you through feelings. The feelings are yours, you create it, and many times, we believe that these feelings are caused by other people, but this is not true. Unfortunately, this is a very deep belief. Now, if you temporarily make this association, that feelings are the subjective part, you will be able to relate more to your subjective part, and you will be able to relate more to yourself. In other words, recognize who you are. Feelings are not something separate from you. If you feel stressed, this affects your body. The same thing happens when you feel sad, happy, angry, that is, regardless of how you feel, it is always affecting your body. For example, the subjective part sends you a signal that your bladder is full, or tells you that you are stressed, and that you should raise your blood pressure. In other words, the subjective part does not discriminate, it simply sends the signals without determining whether they are good or bad. It sends pain signals, and this is important because many times what we do is ignore the pain by taking pills or medications, and we do not attack the source of the pain, which could be the stress itself. Most of the time, we do not pay attention to these communications from our subjective self, and then we start retaining energy, and this is the cause of all our diseases, believe it or not. So, to maintain a healthy body, we must pay attention to the subjective communications of our body. Our body always acts when receiving these communications, but our objective self often does not act in the most efficient way to keep the body healthy. In other episodes, I will give you some tips to maintain a healthy body. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to this channel.